Once the center of the gold rush and the Silicon Valley tech boom, San Francisco feels almost unrecognizable nowadays. Today, the city has one of the highest rates of homelessness per capita in the country, with 887 homeless people per 100,000 residents. It also ranked number 1 in the country for package theft and number 5 in the country for auto theft. On top of this, numerous places have closed down in San Francisco, leaving the city full of empty buildings and wood-covered windows and doors. It's also one of the most expensive places to live in the nation, with Zillow putting the average home value at nearly $1.3 million. That's an amount that would mean a monthly mortgage payment of about $7,000, far above what most Americans pay at $1,768 per month. But what's behind this change in San Francisco? Well, today on Across the Globe, we're going to be looking at the rise and fall of San Francisco. History of San Francisco's rise. The history of San Francisco began all the way back in about 3000 BC, when its first residents came to the area. But don't worry, we're not actually going to go that far back. Instead, we're going to look at San Francisco's more recent history, starting with the Gold Rush. January 24, 1848 was a special day for the state of California. It was on this day that a man named James W. Marshall was overseeing construction in the city of Coloma, which is located northeast of San Francisco. As he was working, something caught his eye on the ground. As he bent down to investigate further, he realized that he had found gold. Though people were excited about this, at first most weren't sure whether they should trust the testimony of a random man they had never heard of before. But when President James Polk confirmed that there was in fact gold in California, people rushed here in droves, lured by the idea of getting rich quick. Ultimately, that rush was what really catapulted the development of San Francisco as a major city. Over the next few decades, San Francisco grew in population and in physical size. New buildings were constructed, work started on the Central Pacific Railroad, and soon cable cars became a common sight on the city's streets. By the time the 1930s came around, San Francisco's growth had shown no signs of slowing down. In fact, it was during this period that the city started construction of the Golden Gate Bridge and the San Francisco Bay Bridge. Then, something big happened in the mid-1900s, something even bigger than the discovery of gold. The 60s and 70s brought the start of the electronics and chip industries, laying the groundwork for what would become the Silicon Valley tech movement. This period led to the start of Intel in 1968 and the launch of a company that would play a major role in microprocessor production. In 1972, two major venture capital firms, Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia Capital, were established here. These firms were founded just in time to see a huge boom of successful startups like Apple, Microsoft, Adobe, Oracle, and Cisco. And as you probably already know, the success of these early Silicon Valley companies has led to continued growth in the region today. For instance, Tesla was established here in 2003, Facebook in 2004, and Uber in 2009, among numerous other companies. In large part, because of Silicon Valley's influence, San Francisco has risen to become the 6th largest economy in the US and a major player in the global economy. All in, San Francisco has a GDP of $501 billion. San Francisco's fall. At this point, it might seem strange to imagine that a city that on the surface appears so successful is actually crumbling underneath. But it does in fact seem to be crumbling. In 2020, for instance, the city saw one of the highest percentage population declines in the entire country. The population decreased by 7.2% between 2020 and 2021, followed by a 0.3% decrease between 2021 and 2022. All in, 250,000 people have left the San Francisco Bay Area since 2020, and a new study that projects population growth through 2060 indicates that the city may never recoup the number of people it lost. Furthermore, even as things started to return to normal after the pandemic, and people began moving back to other cities throughout the US that they had temporarily left, San Francisco still saw a decline in its population. There are several reasons for this, and we'll start with reason number 1, high cost of living. There's no doubt about it. San Francisco is one of the most expensive cities in the entire US. Bankrate, for instance, says that the city is 28% more expensive than anywhere else in California. Plus, it's 79% more expensive to live here than elsewhere in the US. Specifically, utility bills are 32% more expensive than elsewhere in the US. Food is 31%, transportation is 38%, and housing can be up to 207% more costly. I will note that salaries in the San Francisco area tend to be higher than they are nationally. For instance, the median salary for an individual in the Bay Area is $96,421, and the median salary for a household is about $119,000. Compare that to the national numbers, in which the median household income is a little under $71,000, and it's clear that, as a whole, people are paid more in San Francisco. However, just because they're paid more doesn't mean that people are actually able to afford to live here. McKinsey says that over 1 million people in the Bay Area earn below 30% of the median income in the area. Many people spend over 75% of their income on rent, far above the 30% typically recommended by financial planners. And when we look at the cost of housing, it's pretty clear why people are spending so much on rent. The median cost of rent in San Francisco, according to Zillow, is about $3,500 a month. Furthermore, the median home sale was $1.3 million in July of 2023. It's probably pretty clear that the average San Francisco worker who's earning less than $100,000 a year isn't going to be able to afford a $1.3 million home. Because of this, many people get stuck in a cycle of renting and realize that they may never end up becoming a homeowner, at least not in the Bay Area. As a result, some of these people are leaving the city to try and find more affordable housing elsewhere. Surprisingly, it's not just the average or low earners in San Francisco who are leaving because of the high cost of living. In fact, even wealthy people are leaving the city. This has resulted in a $7 billion net income loss for San Francisco. Let's take a look at reason number 2. Reason number 2, crime. Unfortunately, San Francisco has seen an uptick in crime in recent years. Between January and April of 2023, for instance, there was a 5% increase in homicides compared to the same time period the previous year. Though I will note that other forms of violent crime, like assaults, have seen a significant decrease. However, robberies have increased 16.1%. This hasn't just affected people on an individual level, it's also hurting companies. For instance, in 2021, Target announced a reduction in night hours for some of its San Francisco stores due to frequent shoplifting. Similarly, Walgreens closed 5 of its San Francisco locations because of an increase in crime. This year, T-Mobile shut down its main store in downtown San Francisco, followed by closures of Whole Foods and Nordstrom as well. Remember, these aren't just any stores, they're major retailers. Their absence means more empty storefronts, less spending, and fewer visitors to the downtown area, all of which negatively impact the city. To put this even further into perspective, in Union Square, which is located in downtown San Francisco, 90 out of 203 retail stores have closed down since early 2020. But it's not just crime that's affecting downtown San Francisco. Reason number 3, homelessness. 70% of San Franciscans think homelessness is one of the top 3 problems in the city, and they may be right. There are approximately 7,754 homeless people in San Francisco, although in the entire Bay Area, there are estimated to be about 38,000 homeless people on any given night. That's a 35% increase since 2019. Furthermore, 4,000 people are estimated to be sleeping on the streets each night because of a lack of shelter beds. and 35% of homeless people in the city are estimated to be chronically unhoused, which is 10% higher than the rate of chronic homelessness across the rest of the country. What may be particularly frustrating for residents of San Francisco is that homelessness has increased even in the midst of improved funding to address the problem and new policies for affordable housing. So how did San Francisco get to this point? Well, according to McKinsey, the reasons for this increase are, as you can imagine, pretty complex. They point to factors like the opioid epidemic, increased housing costs, and lack of affordable housing units, and a mental health crisis, among other causes. And the reasons people are experiencing homelessness make it particularly hard to address the crisis. For instance, as McKinsey notes, unhoused people often suffer from other issues in addition to homelessness, like addiction, mental health illnesses, and chronic health issues. Because of this, it can be challenging to successfully get these people out of homelessness for good. It's not as simple as providing housing and money for food, as many of these people need healthcare, mental health care, and often drug rehabilitation. But even if this were as simple as providing more housing, the city seems unable to meet that need. McKinsey estimates that the Bay Area needs to build 700 affordable housing units each month to meet the demand for affordable housing. That's a ton. And historically, the city has only built about 30% of this estimated need in the same time period. Either way, it doesn't seem like there's an easy solution, and unfortunately, it looks like San Francisco will likely continue to struggle with this issue. Reason number 4: drug use. Another issue that San Francisco has struggled with, and one that often goes hand in hand with homelessness, is an increase in drug use. This has especially been the case in downtown San Francisco, and particularly in the Tenderloin district. Here, 200 people died of drug overdoses between January 2023 and March 2023. Many of these were from fentanyl overdoses. In fact, the use of drugs is so prevalent here that the Tenderloin district has been nicknamed the $1 Million Mile by drug dealers because of how many drugs they can sell and how much money they can make as a result. Up until recently, open-air drug use hadn't been unheard of either, with people using drugs in broad daylight. And while the city has started cracking down on this, it might not be as effective as they want it to be. For instance, according to CBS, between May 30 and June 18, only 53 people were arrested for public drug use. A new policy went into effect in July, in which people will be sent to drug court after 2 arrests instead of 5. But it still remains to be seen how effective that will be. And while drug use in the Tenderloin district may be one of the worst areas in the city, it's not restricted to just this area. Throughout San Francisco, there have been about 2,200 overdose deaths since 2020. Reason number 5: remote work. In the context of everything we've looked at so far, which is San Francisco's high cost of living and a rise in drug use, crime, and homelessness, this last factor seems a little more tame in comparison, but it still has contributed to San Francisco's decline. This factor is the rise of remote work. As we established earlier, San Francisco is one of the major tech hubs of the world, and as you can imagine, it's easier overall for tech workers to work remotely, especially if your entire office is confined to a laptop. Much of remote work continues even after the pandemic ended, especially for those who work in tech. And because of all the factors we saw earlier, those who were no longer tied to the Bay Area for work reasons simply decided to move. However, this has resulted in a significant vacancy rate for San Francisco's offices. Currently, about 30% of San Francisco's office space is vacant, representing approximately 35 million square feet of real estate. The local economy has been negatively impacted by the high vacancy rate in several ways. For starters, the downtown area has experienced a significant decrease in activity. This decline, in turn, has affected local businesses like coffee shops, restaurants, and bars, which are struggling due to a lack of customers. Additionally, the reduction in office rentals has also led to a decrease in tax revenue for the city. The consequences of fewer office workers downtown even extends all the way to public transportation, as fewer people commuting means fewer transit riders and less revenue for San Francisco's transportation system. However, even for those tech workers who have decided to remain in the city, the future looks unclear. Recently, mass layoffs affected around 24,000 people in the tech industry, including those working for Bay Area-based companies like Twitter, now X, Meta, and Alphabet. While overall the unemployment rate in San Francisco is lower than the national average, this is still a big deal and may cause even more workers to leave the city. What about the worst towns in California? Watch this video to learn about that.